Hey everyone, this is my social media safety presentation. This is CIS 4850. My name is John Boyak. So to jump into this really quick, we're just going to kind of define our terms a little bit. I think it's always important to really define exactly what we're talking about. So what is social media? It's computer-based technology that facilitates the sharing of ideas. Content includes personal information, documents, videos, and photos. So this is important for a few reasons. This definition is a little bit broad, but it can include sites that maybe we don't think are social media, but actually are social media. So, and we'll get into that. I'll get into more of those specifics later. I have a whole slide about it. This is something too. I remember when I was young, people talking about oh, it's a trend, it's a fad, it's gonna come, it's gonna go, but that's not true at all. So this is kind of showing, okay, in 2005, just 5% of American adults use at least one of these platforms. By 2011, that share has risen to half of Americans, and today, 72%. So this is big because it's just showing that, okay, it's here to stay, it's increasing, it's ever increasing, and it's something that we really got to be thinking about. This shows a kind of demographic breakdown. So what's interesting about this graph is we see, okay, right at the start, we have a lot of young kids that are in social media, they're using a lot of it, and that just kind of that trend continues as they get older, and this is something we kind of call the cohort effect. So when young kids are using it and they're engaged in it, they're going to bring other young kids in on it, and it's just going to be a snowball and it's going to continue. Now what's important too about this though is that with all these young kids using it, it's something they kind of have to be a little more aware of, and we get into this a little bit later, but more than half of employers have found content on social media that cause them not to hire a candidate. So this is big. This is huge. A lot of people, they think about, okay, I just want to post this cool thing with my friends or whatever, but that sometimes can cost them a job that they're not even thinking about way down the line. So this is something to kind of keep in mind as this presentation goes forward, to think about, okay, well, what am I posting that could be potentially negative, or it could have potential negative repercussions. So this shows kind of how much time people are using on social media, and it kind of breaks down the sites here. A lot of time spent on social media these days. An insane amount, especially kind of, in the times we're living in now. But this is something, the more we interact with something, the more information we give up. This is true, even when you're building like a personal relationship with someone in the real world, the more that you interact with them, the more they figure out, okay, well, who you are, what your interests are, what your tics are, things like that. Same thing with social media. And we might not be thinking about it as we kind of share posts or like posts or kind of, comment on things. All that is kind of a breadcrumb of who we are. And when you get enough of that, you kind of paint a good picture about who this person is, so that you might, be able to exploit them in some way. So this is kind of like going through just the common sites here. We've got Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I put Amazon in here. And I put Amazon in here for a really specific reason. And I have a whole slide to it, and we'll get there. But, it is weird how much information people give up about themselves on Amazon. So this is just a nice little safety cheat sheet here. Be cautious of sharing too much information, adjust your privacy settings, verify who you're connecting with, know your employer's acceptable use policy. This is big. I have a slide on it, but you gotta know what you can share on your own private time on social media, because sometimes that treads into work a little bit, and it can have work repercussions. Control what information is shared. Dual authentication too. Use the dual authenticator. I use a dual authenticator on almost everything that I can. It's easy, it's quick to set up. It's very, very, very helpful, and it makes sure that you're getting into your accounts and other people who aren't supposed to get into your accounts can't. Know how to block or unfriend, and then a big one too always is just strong passwords. I mean, that's just basic. You gotta have strong passwords. Long passwords, complex characters, numbers, things like that. That's good. So this is going into the sharing too much. And of course, this is, over the top. This is, in the realm of almost unbelievable. But it's interesting because it kind of lays down a good foundation. So there's a show on Cartoon Network, it's a cartoon called Amazing World of Gumball. And in this specific episode, you have the young kids teaching the mom about how to use social media and kind of what to not post. And this is an example of what not to post. So here you have Nicole Watterson, and you have her profile, and okay, it's her birthday. So, okay, well, you have the date there, so it's her birthday that day. You see, okay, well, she's here with her family. Her mother's holding up a card that has an address on it, and Nicole's holding up her credit card, and of course there's a mirror behind that's also showing the back of the credit card. So again, it's over the top. It's exaggerated, but it does show a good point of people. I've seen people post kind of photos like this that reveal a lot of information about themselves that they're not even aware of. They're not even thinking about it. And that's even in the Homeland Security example when there was a virus that got into an Iranian enrichment facility. They were able to tailor that virus specific to the controllers in that facility because of a press op that happened there that kind of showed what was going on. So again, this is way out of there, but it's something you kind of got to be aware of. Something you got to just keep in your mind. Okay, well, if I post this photo of me, what else is in the background that maybe I don't see, but someone else, like a potential employer, or whoever could see. So this is my post about Amazon. I put this in there because I was kind of browsing. I was really, I guess, weirded out by how much information people were sharing. So going through this review, what can we get from it? We know that they bought a security system around July 2019. We know what cars belong to her because they're shown there in the photo. We know her name. We know where the cameras are physically located on the property based on the angles that they have. We know the brand of cameras, so that if there's an exploit for that specific brand of camera, we can just search that. We know that they're recording it with a 3 terabyte drive. We know they're using Internet Protocol to look at the cameras. We know what switch they're using because they link it. We know what power of the Ethernet injectors they're using because they link them. And we know that it's linked to the cloud. So this is just if you're a burglar and you want to go into this person's house, this is a treasure trove of information of, well, yeah, I can just get around this because I know where all the cameras are. I know how it's set up. I know how, and you can plan out your attack route through that. And this is just someone who just, they're probably just thinking, oh, I'm being helpful online. But the amount of information they gave up here is just outstanding. And when people post these, they'll blur out their license plate, which, okay, that's helpful, but they give up all this other information. So it's interesting kind of what people value and don't value. So this is big. So this is location services. And this is something that always blows my mind. Just, that people will willingly give this information up. And even from this photo, I mean, if you're thinking about it from a cybersecurity standpoint, what can you get from this photo? Well, a few things. So you can get that, I'll say this is my personal Snapchat. So you kind of have my general location. You have the fact that I'm using an iPhone. You have the fact that I'm connected to wireless. And you know that I have friends here who are kind of around the Metro Detroit area and that they have their Snap location on. So the thing is with location information, especially now, is that it is very, very accurate. I mean, within 10 yards, you can kind of place people and you can see patterns about behavior. You can see, okay, well, if someone's going to a location for 5 hours a day, 4 days out of the week, they probably work there. And you can see just, that's, the patterns of where they're moving. So that if they spend most of the time in one location, well, it's probably their house. And what's weird to me too is that Snapchat's often seen as less committal. It's seen as less serious. So people will willingly give up their Snapchat to whoever, on dating apps or Facebook or any kind of social media site. But they're giving up this information about them, which could actually manifest in some sort of like physical threat. And this is what I mean by online threats manifesting into real world violence. So this is, again, a little bit extreme, but there was a federal judge who was on a highly publicized case, and a gunman was able to get her address and went to her home. So this is something that is out of her control because he got the information not on a social media site. But it's something that illustrates the point of, we got to try to protect as much information we can about ourselves getting online, because once it's online, it's almost impossible to get off. This again, talking about location services. There was this from MSNBC. So there was a man who was using a fitness app to track his bike path, and ended up tracking him past a house a few times. And what ended up happening is, I guess that house was burglarized. The cops kind of subpoenaed Google for all the information. They saw that his location data went past the house a few times, and then he ended up getting involved in this burglary that he was never a part of. And this is too, while this, the fitness app isn't a social media app, but it still operates under the same location service umbrella. So sometimes you're giving up that location information and you're not quite sure about where it's going, and the thing is that it's all getting gathered. So this is a big one too. I talk about selling your data. We talk about data, location data. your birthday, things like that, any sort of identifiable information, your shopping habits, that's all data. And this is interesting because it's pretty much Facebook higher up saying, yeah, we'll sell it for a fee. And that's something, a lot of people are now, they're moving to VPNs, they're trying to kind of obscure their online behaviors a bit. And I think that's also a good tool to do, because you want to protect your data, because they're just going to take it, they're going to sell it, you're going to hit with advertisements, you're going to hit with potentially malware, things like that. So you guys always be thinking about that, and any sort of blocking that you can of your data getting breached or leaked or whatever is always good. So going back to the safety cheat sheet, we're talking about adjusting privacy settings. This is big. You go on any sort of search engine, you search how to adjust privacy settings for Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. You'll usually get pointed to a really nice article, and they'll lay it all out. And this is big, so Facebook has a nice one here, and it just goes through everything and lets you have, they're getting a little more kinds that people are worried about their privacy. So they lay it out and it lets you really fine tune your privacy adjustments. Another one too, we're talking about, going back to the cheat sheet, about knowing who your friends are. Romance scams in 2019 cost people $201 million, and unfortunately this targets a lot of older people, and even from the chart earlier we see that older people are getting online. So, and they might not be as savvy, so when someone adds them or tends to be someone, and they're not, going back to sharing too much information, they think, oh, well, they're into this activity or that activity. They're able to befriend this person, gain a level of trust, and then they start going for wire transfers or gift cards or, so that's something too. You gotta warn, you yourself not only have to be cognizant about it, but you have to kind of warn people who might not be as tech savvy about the potential dangers of adding people that you don't know who they actually are. So this is another big one. It's called social media etiquette. This seems to be, some days this seems lost on the internet, and people just go off the deep end. And this goes back to knowing your employer's acceptable use policy. Even if you're at home and you're posting your own social media account, sometimes that can bleed over into work. Sometimes your employer has an acceptable use policy, and your actions are against that. So you need to know what your employer's acceptable use policy is. You follow it in your own private life. But a big one too is that people have this thing of online revenge that's becoming more and more popular, where they will very much, someone will wrong them and they will spend their time going through and what bad thing do they do online that I can put in the limelight. I mean, we saw that even in 2016 during the presidential debates. There was a guy named Ken Bone who asked a question, and people ended up going through his entire Reddit account and ended up finding some sort of post that he made that was a little unsavory. And then they put him on blast for that. So something too, when it's the moment that you're in the public spotlight, if you've posted anything that could be looked at as negative online, people will find it and they will post it. So that's one thing too. You might think, okay, well, I won't be a target because what have I done that's wrong? But you never know, and it's always better to be safe than sorry. So always make sure of what you're posting. And that's too, we're talking about you may lose your current job or lose the opportunity to get a job that you want. So kind of know what your potential employer, what the job you want, know what their policy is, and try to shoot for that at least. That would be my advice on that. A big one too, think before you post. Another big thing too is, think before you post. So this is big. People, they have this a news story will break, they want to get on it, and this is a good quote. They talk about, you have the adrenaline of, I want to be a part of something, I want to see something so profound, and people just kind of go on and they'll just post whatever, and they'll just let it rip, and they'll just put whoever on blast, they'll post, and that's something too where a lot of stuff, sometimes news stories shake out differently than how we originally read them to be, so you got to be careful about that, because again, the internet is a graveyard full of ghosts, and they will come back to haunt you. So you just have to be careful. You have to be aware. You have to always be, you don't have to be so paranoid about everything and what you're sharing, but, have a healthy dose of paranoia when you're posting online isn't a bad thing, at least in my opinion. You have to be aware of it. You kind of got to curate, social media can curate the best side of you, so use it to be that. Show what's best in you, and don't try to use it as some sort of revenge tool or some sort of soapbox to make this giant grandstanding speech on, because sometimes you might think people are on your side because you're on the right, but that might not always be true. So there's my presentation. I hope you learned something. Thank you so much.